Yo, what up? Welcome to another episode of Bringing It to the Table. You got Antonio Brooks right here.
Chris Brown, CB.
Jacob Kern.
So, we got my man Jake. So is this the title?
Yeah, Not Addicted. Yep.
So he got a interesting outlook on addiction and everything like that. It's called his book is called Not Addicted. I don't think is it published yet or?
Oh yeah, it's published. It's just not currently just in regular paper form, but I'm working with certain individuals to get it printed, as well as the full book deal. So
cool. So you Not Addicted is the name of the book. Interesting, really interesting take on it. You want to break down your basis?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you kind of a brief description of what it is. So I am a recovering, once physically dependent person on heroin. That would have been 9 years ago. And in that time, I have had plenty of experiences with people with addiction. Started out by leading Nar-Anon meetings, did speaking for FAN, even NA and AA, and then started working at a methadone clinic here in Saginaw a couple years ago, and then
The one in Carrollton?
Yeah, the one in Carrollton, yep. And then got the job over at TriCap, which is a community corrections facility. And I guess I have my own unique take on this problem of addiction. I don't believe it's a disease. The way I summarize it is, for me at least, I will not use again unless I decide to do so. When you spend a lot of time in this world, you see there's a lot of philosophies on it, on what addiction is.
Right.
There obviously is the standard kind of treatment approach, which that it is a disease. And I've always kind of taken an issue with the idea that you'll often be told, especially if you're watching and you've been to treatment before, you've gone to meetings before.
Okay.
I guarantee you've been told at one point that unless you see it as a disease and unless you see it as a lifelong struggle, then you're not going to get clean. And I've always taken an issue with the idea that if our goal in treatment is to get people to stop using their substance,
Okay.
why would we ever think it's a good idea to tell them that even if they do stop, they're still going to struggle with addiction no matter what? I mean, that is the main premise of disease. It's that even if you stop, you still have the disease, and you need to formulate the rest of your life around the idea that you used to have an issue with the substance. And
Right.
I think this language, at least from what I've seen, this language tends to harm more people than it does help. Especially when you take the stats from treatment, which say that only 5% of individuals who go end up actually getting better. 95% of individuals end up relapsing within the first 2 years.
Right.
And usually those 95% are looked at as, well, they just weren't ready for it yet, right?
Okay.
They just weren't ready yet. They just need to keep coming back and all this and that. And it's like, well, maybe simply, and I say this only because I believe change is a sales pitch. Maybe it's they don't want what we're selling as change. And so I looked at that and thought of, okay, how can we approach this problem, or at least how can I approach this problem in a way that can make it, I guess,
More attractive.
more attractive.
So you're gonna change the sales pitch.
Change, essentially that's what I'm doing. It is primarily based on the fundamental tenets. If you're interested in evidence-based practices, it is primarily based on CBT, the idea that what you think will dictate what you feel, which then will dictate what you behave. So if I introduce myself as, hey, I'm so-and-so and I'm an addict, then by the principles of CBT, then if I think I'm an addict, I'm going to feel like I am, and I'm going to behave like I am.
Okay.
Yeah. And I feel like this is the exact thing that keeps a lot of people struggling with this problem for as many years as
I
they
believe so.
So,
That's good, because in success, you have to believe, if you are an entrepreneur, if you want to be a prominent real estate agent, you have to believe that you're going to be a prominent real estate agent. So you have to live your life like that. So when you keep on claiming to be something, then basically you taking on that identity. And so you're going to, like you said, you're going to keep behaving that way. You're going to, if I'm standing up every time I talk and saying I'm an alcoholic or I'm an addict or I'm this and I'm that, and I'm identifying myself as that, that's what I'm telling you to look at me as. You know, I've seen people say I'm an ex-addict or I'm a recovering. You know, that's better, but I don't. I've never been the type of person that did that. I never understood why would I stand up and keep calling myself something that I'm trying not to be.
You're right. When I identify myself, if I'm somewhere and I'm a sheriff, I say my name is such as Chris Brown. I'm in recovery.
Yeah.
Continually in recovery. So I don't label myself as an addict. Why? Because I'm not an addict. Why? Because I'm not using it.
Right.
So why would I put myself in that position of being what I am no longer am?
Yeah. I heard my man, we were just talking about Ricardo, and one of the classes that we had, he said the same thing. He don't look at himself as an addict, or he don't announce himself as an addict, because he's not an addict. He's not using. He's not actively using. He's not doing the stuff that he said. He was like, I'm not stealing my family members' stuff. I'm not going to pawn stuff to go try to get high. I'm not behaving in the addict's way of behaving.
Right.
Like, I'm doing something different, so that's what you're going to claim.
So, if possible, Jake, can you share, because last night, me, Brooks, and Saginaw Jeff, we talked about the disease, and I said, I believe it's just a choice. And Saginaw Jeff said, in the beginning, it's a choice. You know, my bad. It's a choice, and then after that, it's a disease.
Mm-hmm. What are my thoughts on that?
Yeah, what are your thoughts? Because I know, believe it or not, I already used some of your material in some of my groups.
Yeah. I don't know if I 100% agree with that. I believe the only thing that mimics the idea that it's a disease is that if the addict stops using, they're going to experience withdrawal.
Okay.
Which kind of gets, and I don't look at, I mean, I do look at withdrawal as a primary motivator for why somebody would continue to use.
Right.
But I don't look at it as something that causes an individual to continue to use.
Right.
I believe it's a major influence on it.
Oh, wait, say that one more time. You said that the withdrawals are a primary motivator of why somebody would continue to use. That's deep.
But it's not a cause.
That's deep.
I ain't never heard it put that way.
Yeah, in the Not Addicted, I separate the difference between a cause versus an influence. You see, in the treatment world, there's a lot of talk about what are the underlying causes. What caused you to use drugs? What caused you to go on doing this? And the fact is, I don't believe there are really any causes of addiction. I believe that there are only influences to it. So it's actually funny we're talking about this, because it's everything I talked about in my groups this past week.
Okay.
If you want to talk about a cause of addiction, in my opinion, it is desire. Being one way or another, the addict desires to a certain degree to use substances, and this is the thing that makes them continue to do it. And when you look at that desire, there are many influences on it. Somebody's environment can influence this. The people they hang around, feeling certain ways can produce a desire to feel better.
Trigger.
Yes, which as you know, an addict has figured out rather well that doing certain substances can certainly make you feel good. They don't solve the problem, but they can definitely make you feel good.
Right.
And so I believe it's the desire, whether it be the desire for that feeling, whether it be, I mean, and let's be honest, some addicts simply just don't want to care about anything. You know, I don't know about you, but I mean, heroin made me not care about anything. You know, you feel no pain practically, and I can't look at that and say that wasn't that wasn't a reason for why I was doing it. I can't look at that and say, no, there's some other thing, when in my mind, the primary motivating reason for why I did heroin is because it felt good and I didn't want to care about anything. And at that time, not caring about anything felt good to me. It made life, as destructive as heroin use is, it also made life easier in that sense that I just didn't have to care about anything.
So, in that sense, when you seen a therapist about this, what they did they help you tack that situation head on? That
No.
it felt good, or did they bring a whole bunch of other situations from your life into the
I know
problem?
you've read the material. But no, I would say overall, and I'll just freely say this too. I believe addiction, however you conceive addiction and what it is, that is true to you. It's true to the individual. If somebody believes it's a disease and that it requires a lifelong treatment, then I'm not going to, and that has worked for them, then I'm not going to tell them they need to look at it the way that I do.
Right.
Because they found what works.
Right.
So I remember when I entered treatment, I did a Suboxone treatment program. And when I entered treatment, I remember I sat down with my counselor, and the question, that kind of always comes up if you've been in a treatment of any kind. They'll say, they'll ask you something along the lines of, why are you here? And so my response simply was, well, I did heroin. I don't want to do it anymore, and so you guys are treatment, and so here I am. And the question would come up, why do you think you did heroin? My response was simply, well, I wanted to. I liked it. It felt good. I don't like it anymore. I want to stop. And then that's when the other questions would come in, like the next one, tell me about your past. And so I detail my past, and I'm just going to read it to you. I included it in my material, but I'll give you the brief dialogue of the conversation. So why do you think you did heroin? Me, because I liked it. It felt good, and who doesn't at the end of the day like feeling good? My counselor responds, well, tell me about your past. For me, I was raised in a very Christian home. And so my counselor, pipes in, oh, so when you got older, because of your strict upbringing, you went through a rebellious stage, and doing heroin was probably a part of that.
Right.
And I go on to say that my parents got divorced when I was in 4th grade because my father had cheated and had issues with alcohol. And my dad moved to Ohio, and we stayed with our mom. My counselor then responds, so not only do you have abandonment issues from your parents separating, but it also sounds like since your father was an alcoholic, you had a predisposition to becoming an addict yourself.
Wow.
And then I say, after about 4 years later, my father died then from his alcoholism. My counselor says, see, now we have grief you haven't dealt with as well. So say no more, Jacob. You clearly have underlying issues you haven't dealt with, which is why you used heroin to cope. And I make this point with this, that my counselor could have been right. She could have been absolutely right. And for some people, she is. But the problem is I didn't see it that way. To me, those issues that she had mentioned, they were irrelevant to my using.
Right.
But they were not irrelevant to my life.
You're right.
You see, there's a major separation there, and for me, I always kind of separated my using from what my life is, simply because I knew, number one, that it was something I didn't want to engage in forever, nor did I think I had to engage in it forever. And so I generally give the simple rule that you need to learn to separate your using from your life, unless you want to make using your life.
So you saying in so many words that if you'd have focused on what the therapist said, your counselor, and went towards trying to deal with them situations, you say your treatment, you probably wouldn't be where you're at today in your treatment, or do you think it would delay your recovery?
It would have, in my mind, and I'm gonna keep repeating that. In my mind, it would have been a distraction from what the real issue was. for me.
So what was the real issue for you? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, so the real issue for me at the end of the day was the fact that I liked it. I know that sounds very simplistic, and I get this kind of comment a lot. Like, Jake, you make it sound so dang simple, and I don't think you understand. I often get accused of not really having been an addict because I don't see it in a certain way. The reality is, with my personality, I'm a simple guy. I like simple things. Put this stuff in terms that I understand. And I understand I liked it. It wasn't working out. I was getting bad results. And I decided to make a decision based off of the results. And so had I taken on what my counselor believed were my issues, it would have been taking me to places that I simply didn't see as the issue. The fact is, all of those things, and like I said, I know this isn't the case for everybody, but all of those things that I detailed in that conversation, I had learned to deal with before I ever went on heroin. And so I didn't view them as necessarily a cause of the problem. But I go on to say that substance use is not always caused by underlying issues, but it is always caused by what you think it is caused by. And
I started smoking marijuana and drinking, same way you just said. I didn't really like the feeling of drinking, but hey, I thought it was cool. I like the feeling of marijuana.
Yeah.
So I can relate to you when you say you started doing it because it felt good.
And this is, so in what I'm reading from here, I took a page, I won't lie, I took a page out of like the NA and AA kind of playbook and kind of made a series of steps, if you will. These are mainly just, in my mind, they're not like things that you physically have to engage in, they're simply methods of thinking, thoughts, if you will. So this is from my step 3, what I had just read to you, which is I am free to decide what I believe about my substance use, what it is, how it started, and how I end it. I'm free to decide that. And I'm free to treat my problem based off of what I decide with that. And so, kind of like what you were getting at there, in my mind, I decided these things before I even entered treatment. In my mind, it was as simple as, if I don't want to do it anymore, sober up and not touch it again. That's been working for 9 years now. I will claim that for the rest of my life, I don't anticipate touching heroin ever again. I won't be able to prove that, though, until the day I die and somebody can drug test me in my casket. I don't care. But at the end of the day, that's just how I viewed the problem. Right. And so all those other things that, like, my counselor was injecting, I didn't get it. I looked at that and I said, I think you're kind of missing the mark here.
And you said that to your counselor?
I said that.
How did they take it?
Well, so while my counselor tried, I guess, to kind of dig for those underlying issues, when I had reported that I don't see that as the issue, she pretty much had stopped. Our counseling sessions were literally just me going there and telling her about my week, and that was about it. We didn't really talk about past things, just because I believed I didn't need to. And so I didn't really get any pushback on that end. But I can tell you right now, having started working in this field and putting these ideas out there, I've gotten more pushback for that than I ever did with anything else. I mean, to the point of where prior bosses of mine tried to fire me simply for giving ideas, because the disease approach, or the standard treatment approach, is so entrenched and it's so deep. And some people, like my boss that I had at the time, had been teaching this stuff for 30 some odd years, and she's looking at me like, what are you doing? Like you're.
So what practice or what was it that made them zero in on you and say, you know what, I can't have you teaching this or saying this? Well,
a lot of it, as she had claimed, my boss at the time, was that it's causing a conflict between the people we work with,
Right.
and the therapist. It was causing
Really?
a conflict where it was, the therapist is trying to tell them that, like, this is their problem, this is the way it is, and the residents are, or the people we were working with are saying, well, I don't know if I see it like that, and apparently that was an issue. And so it was worded to me as I'm causing harm to individuals by saying this kind of stuff, and that it's making their job harder. And I looked at that like, well, I mean, okay, you've been in the field for 30 years. If you think I'm wrong, then I'm sure you could convince them that I'm wrong. But the fact is, that's not what we're dealing with when it comes to people.
Right.
That's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who can think for themselves.
Right.
Where the best way to treat a problem is to have them identify what the problem is, and then identify what they believe is the best treatment for it.
Instead of telling them that's the problem.
Yes.
Like, oh yeah, your dad wasn't there, so now you got abandonment
Right.
issues. Oh yeah, your girlfriend cheated on you, so now you trying to compensate, and you doing this and you doing that. They're
Right.
giving you diagnosis to make you think this is why you got
Yeah.
that issue.
So I got two questions. My first
All right.
question is, so do you think that the problem they had with your, I'm gonna call it your research because this is what you put together. The problem they had with it is that it's not part of their evidence-based data.
Well, I mean, it is evidence-based. The evidence is that treatment doesn't work for 95% of individuals. And I am not someone who would look at that and say, well, that 95% is just a lost cause. Again, the fact is, I don't think there's any addict that is really in denial about the severity of their issue or that it's causing problems.
Right.
I don't believe that. I believe, they can see the consequences. Some look at that and say, well, I'm fine with them. I'll do years of using for the sake of a few months in a treatment center, whatever. If that's the cycle you want, then, then, I mean, all right, then that's your prerogative. It's a free country. But I don't look at the 95% as they're just in denial about their issue. If anything, I would say they're in denial about what treatment may be trying to turn them into. They're in denial about what the therapist is saying, this is what you are because of these problems. You're an addict, you're diseased, you're disordered, you can't trust the statements, your best thinking got you here, right? Well, no, their best thinking got them drugs. Believe me, I dare you to try and stop an addict from getting what they want.
Right.
Their
best thinking got them exactly what they wanted.
Yep.
And it's about taking that and then being able to
Direct it
into a different
direction.
Yes, into a different direction.
Absolutely.
And
So,
go ahead.
no, Amy, go ahead and finish that, Jenny. I
Well-
got that last question you good.
Yeah, I mean, so again, in my opinion, the best way to approach it is not to convince the person that, again, they're diseased, they're disordered, they have all these problems. All they can do now is cope.
Right.
But it's to show them that, okay, here's where you exhibited. I mean, like, let's look at your addiction. Look at all, they may not have been good, but look at all the things you did. Look at what you accomplished. Mind you, it was for selfish reasons. It was to attain the drug. It was to attain the substance. But if anything, that should show you what you're capable of when you truly set your mind to something.
But that same desire, drive, and passion towards something positive in your life.
Right.
Family, career, education.
There you go.
You can get it the same way.
The reality is you've already done it. The power is already within you, so to speak. It's just about directing it to the right things.
Right.
If that's what you want, of course.
Right.
So.
Right, and my other question is that your material, how confident are you that this is going to help others in recovery? And why?
I would say I'm 100% confident that it'll help at least one person. I'm 100% confident in that. As to how much it actually, how many people it can reach and how much it will actually help. I mean, I don't know. I'm hopeful for a lot of good results. I believe it will be effective for people, mainly because you can attest to this. I'm pretty sure you can probably attest to this as well. I mean, we see the flip side of this.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We see the results for some people who have gone to treatment numerous times, and their problem isn't getting any better. It's not helping them. We see the people who go to the meetings and they say, yeah, they don't work. If anything, I leave there and they make me want to use.
Yep.
Because all it's talking about is, so we see that. And, again, most treatment providers, they'll look at that and they'll say, well, they're in denial. They're just not ready yet. I don't believe it's that. I believe that this will be most effective for the person who feels like they've been disenfranchised by the treatment process.
That's what I was going to ask you. Who do you feel like that's going to be effective for, and how should somebody read this, and how should they interpret it and use it and take what you offer them and use this to their advantage?
Well, ultimately, they should read it as an opinion. As I believe you should read everything on addiction. I believe you should read as an opinion, and you should ask yourself the question, especially when you're reading something or you're hearing something about the problem. How will this help me to facilitate an attitude of change? I believe that's an important thing to consider, because if you look at some of the statements used by what I guess you could call the experts, things like addiction, the NIDA says this: addiction is a chronic, relapsing brain disorder characterized by compulsive and involuntary substance using and seeking despite harmful consequences.
Okay.
And they also say things like the NIDA, once again, from their Principles of Treatment, a research-based guide, the 3rd edition, I believe it's like page 13, where they say that due to the chronic nature of the disease, relapse is not only possible, but likely. Think about and there's so many other examples like this, like in the Matrix model for relapse prevention. It says that relapse can happen by accident. It says that your addicted brain can invent excuses that can get you close enough to relapse situations so that accidents can and do happen. And then if you continue going down that, I only know this because I taught it for a little bit, and if you continue going down that, it will tell you an example of an accident.
That's interesting.
I'll
I want to hear that.
I'll give you the example. One of the examples, I was in a bar and someone offered me a beer.
Okay.
And according to them,
that's the accident.
According to them, you taking that beer and drinking it was not the result of you deciding to do it, but was the result of your addicted brain putting you in that situation, and then you accidentally grab that beer and you drink it. I'm looking at that and I'm like, first of all, if you're in a bar after you've been an alcoholic, I mean,
set yourself up for failure.
You put you inject a little bit of common sense into it, and it's like, this could be bad, But anyway, so you have statements like that. You have statements like, if you're in some support groups, I know that people hear this. I know I heard it at one point, but you're in a support group of like 10 people, and they'll say to you, only 1 out of 10 of you will make it out of this group. And it's like, why are we telling people this? Why are we telling them this if the goal is to get them to do better? I'm looking at that and I'm like, well, I should just continue using, because it sounds like trying to even get clean is completely pointless.
Completely pointless.
Completely pointless. And so to the person that this would be most helpful to, it's to that individual who has, gone through the treatment process and they're looking at it and they're like, I don't know about this. And all they've been told is that because you don't agree, then you're in denial. But they're looking at themselves and they're like, I don't know if I'm actually in denial. I know I have a problem. I know I need to fix it.
Right.
But I don't know about what I'm being told about what my problem is.
Right.
And so that's who this would be most effective for. is someone who desperately wants to do something about the problem, but maybe hasn't been exposed to alternative ways of looking at it,
Right.
or is just looking, purely looking for a different kind of message on it.
Question. I got one more question because we're
Yeah.
running over. We're gonna be running over in a minute. But so what would you say, or what will somebody in the recovery community say is the holy grail to addiction recovery? Is there a holy grail?
Like, what is the best approach? What is the best form of treatment, so to speak?
The Bible. Yeah.
The Bible of addiction recovery. It's the individual. I would say that. It's your own mind. It's your own capability of thinking, and it's it's taking I guess it's looking at the problem yourself and being able to determine yourself
Right.
what the issues are, what your solution is, and how do you get there. I think the holy grail of treatment is the individual. It's not the science. It's just not. You don't motivate somebody to change through science. You do it through an emotional appeal. And so the addict needs to, in my opinion, cut away the science for a second.
Okay.
Look at their actual life. Look at the results that they're getting and ask themselves some serious questions about it. Ask yourself, do you think you could get better results for your life if you weren't doing this anymore? Ask yourself that. Do you think you're capable of changing your behavior? And I believe most people would say yes, because when the question is usually asked, do you know that if you put like 100% of your effort into something that you could achieve it? I've not met one person that said no yet. And it was like me. It was like me. If I said I know I wanted something bad enough, I know I could do anything to get it. I know that because I've done it before, and I can do it again. But the biggest problem is how badly do I want it? So in that sense, treatment does get it right. It is, you have to want this, and as long as you don't, then that's where the struggle is. I usually say it like this: an addict will struggle if they are only sitting on that fence. When triggers, when cravings, when urges are at their most dangerous,
Right.
is when you have not made up your mind about what you want.
Okay. I feel you.
That's what make them dangerous. You ain't made up your mind.
You haven't made up your mind.
Stop.
It's when you're sitting on the fence, when there's two parts of you that say, I want to do it, but then again, I don't.
So that means that and you still in pre-contemplation then.
Sure. But the problem is that the disease says you can't decide either way. The disease doesn't say that you have the capability of deciding to never touch this stuff again. It says you always have to be on the lookout. It says that no matter what, you will always have this desire, and it needs to be treated, right? It can be arrested but never cured.
Yeah. That's what they say.
And I think that's what keeps people from deciding kind of one way or the other. It's what keeps them always on that fence. It's like, I know I don't want to do it, but at the same time, man, I'm an addict. I got this disease. I always need to watch for it.
Yep.
And it's that, in my opinion, it's that always watching for it. Because it's like we were talking earlier, and I said, I don't go about my day looking for triggers.
Right.
Just run into them.
And as such, I don't really find any. Because I'm not going about my day thinking around the corner I could be triggered, and then the next thing I know
You
I am,
made your mind up,
and now I'm
okay.
thinking about substances.
You made your mind up, right?
Well, yeah, I made up my mind.
So it's not gonna come at you like it would someone that haven't made their mind up.
No, I agree 100%.
You know.
So-
One more thing.
Yeah.
It's just like a person when they come in the TRICAT and they was sitting there by a judge or maybe even the PO sent them there. And some people are just doing enough just to get out of TRICAT. And then once they leave TRICAT, they'll mess up. Then you got the ones who come in and leave right out. And then you got the ones will leave and do right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And the big question is what separates those individuals? What makes the difference? Well, it's a desire. Some people desire to be there simply to do the time.
that's exactly what you
Others desire to be there, again, to maybe it's just to avoid a consequence.
Right,
And as soon as the consequence is gone, then guess what? They're going straight back to what they were doing.
Yeah.
Others desire to be there for the sake of learning something.
You're right.
But we got to look at it and think about this, bro. Everybody don't look at their addiction like it's an issue. Everybody don't look at being addicted to drugs or alcohol as a huge problem in their life. And I mean, and I'm not saying that they should one way or the other, but I think we make a big deal out of certain things that if I care more about your sobriety than you, then I'm overthinking it. You know what I mean? Like I shouldn't care more about anything about an individual than they care about themselves. So sometimes we do that, like in those meetings and stuff like that, when we go and we see how people they start judging people when they start taking little pop shots at each other and whatnot. It's like, what are you really here for? You know what I'm saying? What's the point of you being here?
Get eye for eye, or you're here for recovery.
Yeah. So I think in that regard, like the clinical people, they doing the job. Bless you. They doing the job, and they making their statements and their assessments, but they've never used. They never had a fucking addictive bone in their body, I ain't gonna say that because a lot of physicians, they do have addictive bones in their body. They use drugs too.
Oh yeah, they do.
So yeah, but they never been in the shoes that we have been as addicts and alcoholics. And so like all they can do is just say what they think. But versus you've been there. Mm-hmm. You know how you feel and how it feels to be clean and to be in recovery. So you can speak from experience. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And you speak with passion. And obviously you've done your research. So I would probably trust your word better than I would trust somebody who wouldn't. You know what I'm saying? Like just sitting on the couch, they telling me something that they think. You telling me something that you've been through.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll say this because that's, once again, another thing you kind of get hit with a lot in this, at least from a recovery coaching kind of standpoint, is that, you're looked at as more credible to a certain degree because you've actually had the experience.
Right.
But I do take issue with the fact that, or with the mentality that just because somebody hasn't gone through it themselves, then I'm going to totally discredit them. Yeah. The reality is that people who have never gone through this stuff, while you may disagree with the way they view the problem, you may believe that they don't have a good enough understanding. They can be a great example for, at least for an addict, let's say, who is trying to change their life.
Right.
I look at it like this. Somebody who's never gone through this stuff before, they are a perfect example of what it looks like to live without the influence of addiction. They are a perfect example of like the thought process. Their mind isn't occupied day in and day out with ideas about addiction. It's not occupied day in and day out with thoughts about drugs. They're not going around in fear about, my God, when is the next time I'm going to relapse? And equally, the people they hang around, more than likely, their lifestyles are formulated around, not around substances. And this can be a very good example for some people to look to. For some people, it's finding the right individuals, the right mentors, if you will. And all you need to do, you just mimic their behavior, mimic their thinking. And for some, that can be enough to completely change their life. I mean, it's something that I did when I was starting out in this. I found one of my teachers, a former teacher of mine from elementary school. And I would run into him every now and then when I was using. Okay. And he would always say, Jay, come on, let's hang out and all this and that. And I would say, no, I'm busy, I can't. I would always blow him off on that because I knew if I went there that he would be disapproving of the behavior. And the fact is, I don't need that right now. You know, when I was using, I
You want to
didn't.
do your
Right.
thing, yeah.
Yes, when I was using it,
Peace.
right. I didn't need anybody ruining my high. I felt, you know, I felt like, you know, whatever. I got this. I don't need anybody telling me that I don't. But when I decided to get clean, and I'm faced with the reality that I have no idea now what I'm going to do with my life. I have no clue. I don't know even where to start. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to look for and whatnot. He was the first person that I reached out to. And I would spend many days just spending time with him. And I would not only just listen to what he had to say, I would watch how he acted. I would listen to how he spoke. I paid attention to how he dressed. You know, I paid attention. What is his daily routines? What does he do? What does he do for enjoyment? You know, and why can't I do that as well?
Yeah.
You know, and that was kind of my starting point with all of that. I found an example, and I followed it. Now, I also had, just from my own personal belief standpoint, I had an example in the primary text that I read. And so it was about following that too, and obeying that example as well. So
let me ask you this, Jay. What was the breaking point for you to decide you was done? I know you say you didn't want to do it anymore, but what was the break? What led you up to that?
Well, when it happened, I wasn't expecting it to happen.
Right.
The day that I decided I didn't want to do it anymore, I did not wake up that morning and say, "Yep, gonna decide today." That's not what happened. It was completely unexpected, and this is what I think people need to do, or people need to understand. More than likely, the day you decide to change will be on a day you do not plan at all.
Okay.
More than likely. The problem is people look to moments. They say, well, if this happens, then I'll decide to do it. If this happens, then I'll decide to do it. Or they look back and they say, why wasn't that enough for me? Why didn't this event back here make me decide to stop? And they look at that and then they call themselves a failure. Well, because the reality is changing usually happens, or deciding to change usually happens on the drop of a dime.
Right.
There is no planning involved. That's at least how it happened to me. I remember I was on my way to work,
Right.
and I had an old Chevy S10 truck at the time, and I had a bunch of these CDs that I kept in the old CD cases that I had burned off of LimeWire, and I had them all labeled, you know, like this was rock, this was metal, this was rap, this was everything else. And there was a CD in there that was completely unmarked. And I turned it over and I looked and it's like, okay, it's got that ring on it where you can see kind of the difference in the colors,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's like there's something on
there.
There's something on there, and so I popped that in. Well, it was a bunch of old Christian songs that I had listened to when I was younger. And so the first one that played, it was a Chris Tomlin song. It was "How Great Is Our God."
Oh yeah.
If anybody watching is familiar with that song, it starts out with some ambient noise, and then there's a little guitar strum, and then it kind of picks up. I'm telling you, as soon as the ambient sound hit the first 5 seconds, I knew what it was, and I'm telling you, that was when I completely lost it. I was going into work. I called into work, and I pulled over and I pulled into a parking lot, and I literally sat there for hours, just losing it, because the realization had finally came. You know, and for me, especially when I was using, there was an idea that would haunt me every single day. It didn't matter how high I was. It didn't matter what I was doing, but every single day there was an idea that haunted me. And it was about, well...
What was that idea?
Well, it was about, you know, like, well, what about this over here? You know, my beliefs, which in particular, you know, to clarify, it's Christianity, it's Jesus. Mm-hmm. You know, so I would ask myself every single day, well, what about Jesus? You know what you're doing isn't what he wants you to do. And you thinking about it constantly means he ain't left yet. He's still there. He's just waiting for you. That idea would haunt me every single day, and I would try to ignore it as much as I can. and then people would try to bring up conversations about it, and it just made me so uncomfortable. And then just that day came where I put that in, and everything just became so clear. And so that day I decided to call around to treatment centers. I called literally every single one I could. It just happens that the methadone clinic here in Saginaw, Victory Clinic, was the only one that had gotten back with me and said we could get you in tomorrow. Every place else said, well, you gotta wait like a week.
Wait.
And I go to Jim Rohn quote, like we had talked about over the phone the other day, where he says, without a sense of urgency, desire loses its value.
Yep.
So I knew if I waited,
You had to be urgent, right?
I knew if I had waited to act on that desire, that it could have passed,
Yep.
and it could have faded. And so it was just, that was it. That was there were a lot of things as well that kind of played into all that. At that time, I was in I wasn't exactly in the best kind of mental state. A lot of things that happened that I just gotten very frustrated with, that just kind of reinforced this notion that, like, are you sure is this really what you want to do?
Yeah.
And then that was the icing on the cake there.
Okay.
That's good, man.
So that's how that process went, and it's been 9 years since.
Well, congratulations, brother.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. That's a heck of a story right there, man. Heck of a story, and I'm gonna finish reading that book because I just got it last night, and my schedule will be hectic. But I'm gonna finish reading it tonight. And we enjoy having it. Normally we go like a half hour. But we can go on and on and on because I can just listen, bro. Because this is my life, man. Like, this is literally what we do. You know what I mean? So, like, I appreciate everything that you're doing for the recovery community. I'm sure the guys at TriCap, man, is like they couldn't have better mentors and peers there. You know what I'm saying? I thank y'all for letting me come and welcome me into the TriCap family too, because I love having my groups and classes there. Those guys, man, they amazing, bro. They amazing, man. It's like you just want the best for them. You want to see them do the best that they can and live up to their full potential.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that as long as we continue to do stuff like this and put this information out and genuinely have a place in our heart,
Right.
as peers and brothers, for our brothers and sisters, I think that we can help make it a better place, bro.
You do. You see, there is a lot of good in them. They do know, contrary to what some people say, they do know the right from the wrong.
Right.
They do know that. It's just about how do you reach that? How do you get them to listen to that and start acting on the good ideas and good thoughts that they do have? How do you do that? That's kind of the
Try to
big
think of some interesting ways to present it to them.
You have to live the example, bro. You got to be that person, man. When they look at somebody, when you look at somebody, bro, you don't want to just feel like they so far out of reach that what they saying is over my head or it don't apply to me. You want somebody that could tell you exactly what they did. If you looking at them and they look like they doing better for themselves, what did you do? Well, I went here and I did this, and all you got to do is the same thing, basically.
Because they're asked.
They ask all the time.
How you get where you at?
Yeah.
How you stop doing what you was doing, that substance? How did you change your life? How you get where you at now? How you start working here? They want to know. So,
and that curiosity just shows you that there is a side of them that really wants to be done with this.
right.
Yep.
There is that side. The fact that they're asking that question too also shows how confused they are about how to do it.
Yeah.
And again, I see that as some of the, that for some is the only problem. They want to do it, but they don't even know how to. they don't know where to start.
Yep.
They don't know where to begin.
Yep.
They hear all this complicated, as I tend to call it sometimes, all this psychobabble and whatnot. And they're seeing that and they're like, what the heck I can't relate to that.
Right.
And it just confuses them even more.
We gonna pick up on that. Hold that thought. And for this episode, it's been good.
Absolutely.
We enjoyed ourselves. We enjoyed Jake. Thanks for coming and sharing that knowledge.
Like and follow the Not Addicted page on Facebook too, by the way. It's a
Please
picture
do.
of me standing there in black and white with another dude. You'll know.
It's called non-addicted. Wait.
Not
addicted.
Not addicted.
Okay, I don't know if they could see that. Not addicted on Facebook. You got a whole page. There it is.
But that's all right.
Yeah. So, thanks, brother. Appreciate
I
you.
appreciate you guys.
So until we meet again, deuces.
In a minute.